represents the 16th State Senate District, Cheshire, Prospect, Southington, Waterbury, and Wolcott, and parts of that. Hey, Rob, it's Paul. It's been a while. How are you, sir?
I am doing well, Paul. Delighted to be able to join you this afternoon to talk about this very, very important topic.
Yeah, I saw that you were one of the point guys that was quoted in some of the news sites around the state here, Rob. So explain this to people now. Of course, we came off of COVID, and everybody says, well, everybody should be able to get a no-excuse absentee ballot. That's a separate topic to chat about. We'll get to that in a bit. But first off, people may be surprised, Rob, because we're such a blue state in theory, that Connecticut still has relatively tight rules as to who can get and use an absentee ballot.
Oh, that is correct. And the Democrats in the legislature are doing their best to get around that, either by using the legitimate process for amending our state constitution, but they're also willing and have shown their capability of being able to go around that by using the legislative means and even the courts. The most recent example is 2020 when they instituted COVID voting in the state. And of course, at the time, obviously, the fear of the pandemic was palpable, and people in both political parties were certainly, willing participants in the notion of expanding absentee voting as a result of the fear of COVID. But the Democrats this year actually want to go down that same road again. They want to use the fear of COVID as a mechanism to open up absentee voting to everyone in the state. And I'm arguing that they can't possibly do that because that is not within the proper, constitutional requirements. And I also have some concerns about their attempts to expand to no excuse absentee voting, which I'm not against necessarily, but would have to see some improvements in our voter integrity system, signature verification, that kind of thing would have to be in place to really make me happy with such a program in Connecticut.
Yeah, so, Robin, that's what I wanted to get to. So I noticed that you were quoted, and you were the point guy in some of these pieces, who said, okay, well, and it's an intricate process of votes that have to happen to get something on the ballot to ask the people of Connecticut if they're okay with amending the Constitution, playing with the instruction manual, like I like to say. But apparently, did I read this correct, Rob, that you'd be open to some of this in exchange, though, for more types of security measures vis-a-vis signature verification, not allowing ballot harvesting? Are you willing to maybe negotiate on this?
Well, Paul, I would say I live in the real world, and I have served in the Connecticut General Assembly, both in the House and the Senate, and I'm in my 12th year. And it's a foregone conclusion that the Democrats have significant majorities in both chambers, and they're pretty much going to get what they want. I am not a fan of expanding voting beyond one-day in-person voting. To me, that's how an election is supposed to take place. I'm okay with having absentee voting for specific reasons if people contact the town clerk. And we've opened that up tremendously, so you can obtain an absentee ballot numerous different ways. It's not difficult. In those circumstances, I think it's perfectly fine to vote by mail. What the Democrats want to do is they want to expand voting dramatically. This year, there's going to be a provision on the ballot in November to allow for early voting and a constitutional change. And I have grave concerns about that because it's a very vague question. Do you want early voting? And most people would automatically say yes, but the problem is that we don't even know what that means. Is it 3 days? Is it 10 days? Is it 100 days? Is it 1,000 days? And it also would remove the limitation in the Constitution that says that early voting would be in person. So that concerns me greatly. And then, of course, you got the COVID voting question that I just mentioned, that we're going to have a public hearing on Friday morning, and hopefully many people will come out and express their concerns for that. And then there's the no excuse absentee voting. So they're trying an all of the above approach. And I am willing to negotiate, but I am not willing to bend on keeping voter integrity at the forefront.
What are your concerns, Rob? And again, the guest is State Senator Rob Sampson, 16th District. Rob, what are your concerns? For example, I see signature verification is one area that you and some other folks are concerned about. Explain that.
Well, in other states where they have significant mail-in voting, Traditionally in Connecticut, we have like less than 2%, usually less than 1% of ballots are cast by mail because of folks that fall into the categories our Constitution allows to vote by absentee. So it's not a big deal. It doesn't affect a lot of elections. And it's generally speaking people who are requesting those ballots on their own. But what we witnessed in 2020 was a completely different thing, where the Secretary of the State took it upon herself to mail absentee ballot applications to every person on the voter rolls in the state. But the problem is, number one, our voter rolls are a complete atrocious mess. Hundreds of thousands of those ballot applications were returned in the mail as proof that the list is wrong. Other people were disenfranchised because they didn't get one when they were supposed to. And countless people contacted me saying that they got 5 or 6 ones in the mail for people that, used to live there, or their dead relatives, the dog, people that have passed on, their kids that are away in another state. And this kind of thing it basically tests the credibility of the process. I can give you so many examples of ballots that were cast, duplicate votes that were cast by people that were on the voter list twice, which need to be investigated. You have situations where in Connecticut, incarcerated people are not allowed to vote. But we had absentee ballot applications actually mailed to prisoners inside a penitentiary, and then respond and get their absentee ballot sent to them and then vote, all addressed right to their cell in prison. And that just should not happen with our process, and it needs cleaned up. So if we're going to expand mail-in voting, we have to keep the integrity up at the same time.
And now, Rob, I do remember this, and I remember the vote falling short for the change in the Constitution. There's got to be, at least 75% support from you folks in the General Assembly to move the process forward. Now, as obviously you said, most if not all the Democrats are going to do that. Could you ever see enough support from the Republican caucus to hit that 75% mark or not?
Well, the way the Constitution has changed, Paul, is either by achieving a 75% vote affirmative in both chambers, and then it goes to the ballot for voters on the street to make the choice at on Election Day. Or if they fail to reach the 75% number, it's got to pass 2 separate legislatures with a minimum of 50% vote. And they achieved that 50% vote in 2019. They did not get to 75%. And I will take credit for that. I led the fight against them getting 75% because, as I said, they are more than willing to expand the process, but they are ignoring all of the safety measures and all of the things that would give me and lots of other people in the state confidence that our elections are legitimate. And I have offered to them this year, which is a year that they could pass it again at 50%, and it would not matter. So they would have to get to 75%. And I've offered them essentially, let's have a conversation. If you are willing to accommodate my requests and, talk about the subject of voter integrity along with expanding to no excuse absentee voting, maybe I could be convinced to change my vote to yes and also encourage my fellow Republicans to do so. And the reason why is because we're in a rock and a hard place, Paul. They're going to pass it at 50% next year, and it will be the law, and we will have no excuse absentee voting without the protections. So I was quoted in the paper as basically saying I'm not a fan of no excuse absentee voting, and I'm really not, because I do believe voting should be done in person as much as possible. But I'm even less of a fan of no excuse absentee voting without any safety protocols, and that's what we're going to get.
All right, Republican State Senator Rob Sampson, 16th District. Rob, good to talk with you again.